Have you ever thought about it? What if the greatest civilizations in African history weren't lost by accident, but erased on purpose? It's old news that when you try to describe ancient superiority, the first civilization that comes to mind is that of the Greeks, or Romans, or Egypt. But beyond the Nile, tucked under centuries of silence, is Africa. And Africa birthed empires so advanced that they rivaled the more popular neighbors. These kingdoms built pyramids taller than Giza. They mapped invisible stars without telescopes. Even better, they knew how to trade across oceans before Columbus was born. So, why don't we know their names? That's where the jaw-dropping theory came to light. The theory that says the story of Africa was rewritten by those who colonized it. What the colonial masters couldn't conquer, they buried. And these forgotten African empires are part of what they buried. For centuries, Africa was labeled the Dark Continent. Not because it lacked light, no. It's because its light was hidden. But when you think about it, how was an entire continent shoved under the carpet? It all started with a dangerous myth, one promoted by colonial explorers and European historians. This myth rang across countries, saying that Africa had no written history, no monumental architecture, and no advanced science. Can you believe that? But to combat this myth, archaeological evidence tells a different story. In Zimbabwe, there are stone cities that defy engineering logic. How can the colonial masters explain this? There are also reports of the Malian astronomers predicting stellar movements as far back as the 13th century. It gets more interesting. In Ethiopia, rock-hewn churches were carved from a single stone. All these feats were achieved at frequencies that alter average human standards. These weren't tribal anomalies, they were empires. Empires with systems, structures, and sciences that don't fit the linear timeline we've been told. What if this misinformation is why they were forgotten? This is why we have set out to reveal the truth. Are you ready to meet the powerful African civilizations that history erased? Let's dive in. The first on our list of forgotten African empires is the Kingdom of Kush. When people think of pyramids, they think of Egypt. But do you know that Egypt wasn't the only pyramid-building civilization on the Nile? Yes, Kush was a close rival. Welcome to Kush, an ancient African kingdom that flourished for over 1,000 years. At first, this empire had its capital in Napata. Later, it was changed to Meroe, which is said to be deep in modern-day Sudan. For the icing on the cake, the Kushites weren't just Egypt's neighbors. They were once its conquerors. Hard to believe, right? Let's surprise you further. In the 8th century BCE, a paper-tearing event occurred. Kushite kings invaded Egypt, established the 25th dynasty, and ruled as pharaohs. With a strong hand, they revived pyramid construction and redefined Nile Valley architecture. They did not stop there. These Kushite kings also fused Egyptian symbolism with African spirituality. It was clear that they were out to overthrow Egypt's leadership. But there is a problem. While Egyptian names are etched in textbooks today, Kush is treated like a footnote or not included altogether. Why? It's because Kush complicates the narrative that Egypt was a lone beacon of civilization in the dark continent of Africa. And for colonial historians, that narrative was inconvenient. Historians argue that the Egyptians started building the pyramids. While that may be true, the Kushites didn't just imitate Egyptian pyramids. They built more of them. After the war to overthrow Egyptian pharaohs, the Kushites left a trail of pyramids in their wake. Today, over 200 pyramids still stand in Sudan, clustered in royal cemeteries like Nuri and El Kuru. These are mathematically aligned, steep-sided structures constructed with precision stonework. One look at them, and you would see that these pyramids are far from crumbled heaps. They are so sophisticated that they even contain burial chambers with detailed artwork and inscriptions. If the story of Kush left you awed, get ready to meet the megacity that was built from stones. Great Zimbabwe. Tucked into the highlands of southeastern Zimbabwe, there lies the stone ruins of Great Zimbabwe. Brace yourself, this is a city that defies everything we thought we knew about ancient sub-Saharan Africa. Built between the 11th and 15th centuries, Great Zimbabwe once held over 18,000 residents. How massive is that? But not only was the population a sight to behold, their merchandise was too. The Great Zimbabwe did well to thrive as a trade capital with connections to China, Persia, and India. At its center stood a massive stone structure called the Great Enclosure. This enclosure stretched over 820 feet in circumference and nearly 36 feet high. But what truly astonished archaeologists wasn't just the scale, it was the engineering. The walls of this ancient monument were built without mortar. That is, dry stone architecture stacked up with such precision that many still stand perfectly intact. Seeing that the architecture of the Great Enclosure was so sophisticated, questions began to arise regarding its origin. Who built such an engineering marvel? For decades, colonial scholars insisted such sophistication couldn't be African, any continent but Africa. And this is where the mystery deepened. In the late 1800s, British colonists discovered something intriguing. They stumbled on the ruins of the Great Enclosure. But instead of digging deep, they immediately assumed someone else must have built them. Some argued that it was the Phoenicians. Others proposed that it was erected by Arabs or even Egyptians. It was obvious that these suggestions were keen on crediting anything and anyone but indigenous Africans. But there is a rebuttal too blatant to ignore. As opposed to the speculations, radiocarbon dating, archaeological digs, and local oral traditions all confirm the same thing. Great Zimbabwe was built by the ancestors of the Shona people. How was this possible? For context, the Shona people are the descendants of the Karanga people of Zimbabwe. They were part of an ethnic group called Bantu, and this ethnic group hails from South Africa. It was deduced that the ancestors of the Shona people had more up their sleeve than they liked to show. For example, in such a time with limited resources, their builders mastered geometry, city planning, and long-distance trade. On site, the Zimbabweans unearthed minerals like gold, ivory, and even ceramic artifacts from across the Indian Ocean. To date, their abilities surprised their offspring. Still, textbooks for years labeled it a mystery, ignoring the clear evidence. All because Great Zimbabwe proved Africa had cities, science, and sovereignty long before colonizers arrived. And for some, that truth was too troublesome to teach. But after the ancient Shona people erected such art, they mysteriously disappeared. What happened to Great Zimbabwe? By the 15th century, the city was mysteriously abandoned. Scholars point to exhausted resources, droughts, or shifting trade routes. But other historians suggest something interesting. The growing shadow of foreign influence and invasion wiped them out. As European and Arab interests in the city deepened, local empires were destabilized. This was often done intentionally to get profits. In the centuries that followed, Great Zimbabwe was suddenly reduced to legend.